The year is 1342, deep in the heart of a winter that has settled over the northern valleys like a heavy, woolen blanket, immovable and silent. It is a time when the world outside the thick, stone walls of the manor exists only in shades of white and gray, a monochromatic landscape where the sun is a distant, pale coin that offers light but no heat. The snow has been falling for weeks, not in a storm, but in a relentless, quiet accumulation, flake by endless flake, piling against the oak doors and burying the stone paths that lead to the stables and the storehouses. Here, in the solar of the high house, the air is still. It is the hour before dawn, that singular, stretched moment when the night has not yet yielded to the day, and the silence is so profound that it feels like a physical weight, pressing gently against the ears. The room is cold, a deep, penetrating chill that seeps through the tapestries hanging against the rough-hewn stone blocks, a chill that smells of old frost and dormant earth. Lady Alara lies beneath layers of fur and heavy wool, the weight of the bedding a comforting anchor against the vastness of the winter night. She does not move. To move would be to break the seal of warmth that her body has painstakingly created over the long, dark hours. She lies on her back, her eyes tracing the familiar, shadowy beams of the ceiling above, visible only by the faint, dying glow of the embers in the hearth across the room. There is a rhythm to the cold. It is not an aggressor but a constant companion. It waits in the corners of the room, in the gaps between the floorboards, in the space between the heavy velvet curtains and the narrow window slits. It is the reason for everything in this season. It dictates every movement, every choice, every slow, deliberate action of the day that is about to begin. And it is the primary reason why, in these long, frozen months, the concept of a full bath is not merely an inconvenience, but a dangerous impossibility. Alara shifts just an inch, her linen shift rustling softly against the wool. The linen is the first line of defense, the second skin that serves a purpose far greater than mere modesty. In this age, in this depth of winter, water is the enemy of warmth. To strip naked, to expose the body to this biting air, to submerge oneself in water that must be laboriously hauled, heated, and hauled again, is to invite a chill that might never leave the bones. And so, the bath is abandoned. The tub, a great wooden coopered vessel bound with iron hoops, sits overturned in the corner of the scullery far below, gathering dust, waiting for the thaw of spring which feels a lifetime away. Instead, the maintenance of the self becomes a dry, meticulous art. It is a ritual of layers, of scents, and of the absorbent power of fresh linen. Alara breathes in the air of the room. It is crisp, sharp, and smells faintly of the dried lavender sachets tucked beneath her pillow, mingled with the lingering, resinous scent of pine logs that burned down hours ago. Slowly, with the reluctance of one leaving a sanctuary, she pushes back the furs. The cold air greets her immediately, biting at her exposed face and hands. She sits up, the wooden bed frame creaking a low, mournful note in the silence. Her feet find the floor, not the bare wood, but a thick rush mat woven from dried river reeds, offering a meager barrier against the freezing draft that flows like a phantom river along the ground. She moves towards the hearth. This is the first pilgrimage of the morning, the most essential task of survival. The fire is the heart of the room, the only thing that keeps the winter at bay. In the grate, the logs are reduced to a mound of gray ash and glowing red coals, pulsing faintly like a sleeping beast. Ilara kneels on the stone hearth, her heavy woolen robe pulled tight around her shoulders. She reaches for the iron poker, the metal cold and rough against her palm. With slow, hypnotic movements, she disturbs the ash, revealing the heat hidden beneath. There is a soft hiss as the coals are exposed to the air. She takes a piece of kindling, a splinter of dry birch, and touches it to the red center. Smoke curls up, thin and gray, before a small, tentative flame catches. She watches the flame. It is a mesmerizing dance, yellow and blue, fighting for existence in the cold air. She adds another piece of wood, then another, building a cage of fuel around the growing light. The sound of the fire crackling is the only sound in the world. Pop, hiss, snap. It is a language of warmth, a promise that the temperature will rise degree by agonizingly slow degree. She holds her hands out to the growing fire, rubbing them together. The skin is pale, dry from the winter air. There is no water here to wash them. The water in the pitcher on the side table has a thin crust of ice across its surface, a delicate geometric pattern of frost that sealed itself during the night. To break that ice, to dip her hands into the freezing liquid, would be painful. Instead, she reaches for a small cloth, a square of coarse linen kept near the fire, warm and dry. She rubs her hands vigorously with the cloth, the friction generating heat, the fabric lifting away the oils of the night. This is the dry wash. This is how the day begins. The logic of the dry winter is absolute. To bathe in winter is to risk the humors of the body becoming unbalanced. The physicians say that hot water opens the pores, allowing the pestilent cold to enter the body and settle in the chest, bringing fevers and agues. And practically, the logistics are insurmountable. Consider the water. To fill a tub deep enough to cover a body would require 20, perhaps 30 heavy buckets. Each bucket must be carried from the well in the courtyard. The well rope is stiff with ice, the wooden bucket coated in a slick, dangerous glaze. The path from the well to the kitchen door is treacherous, packed with hard snow. The wind cuts through the thickest cloak. Once the water is inside, it must be heated. A cauldron over the kitchen fire can only hold so much. It would take hours of boiling, carrying, pouring, and boiling again to fill a bath. By the time the last bucket is poured, the first is already cooling. The room itself, the great stone hall or the solar, is drafty. The heat from the fire extends only a few feet. A wet body, stepping out of a cooling tub into the stagnant, freezing air of the room, would freeze instantly. The hair would turn to icicles before it could be dried. So the women of the manor, like Ilara, have perfected the art of staying clean without submersion. It relies on the linen shift. The linen, woven from the flax plant, is believed to have special properties. It is absorbent, wicking away sweat and oil from the skin. In winter, the shift is changed daily, sometimes twice a day. A fresh, crisp, white linen shift, warmed by the fire, feels like a cleansing bath when slipped over the head. It scrubs the skin gently, polishing it, keeping it dry and pure. Ilara stands now, the fire roaring softly, casting long, dancing shadows against the stone walls. She moves to her dressing table, a heavy oak chest carved with vines and leaves. On top sits a silver mirror, tarnished at the edges, and a collection of jars and pots. She picks up a comb. It is made of bone, polished smooth by years of use. Her hair, long and heavy, has been braided for sleep. She undoes the braid, her fingers working slowly through the strands. The hair is another challenge of winter. To wash it with water is to invite a headache that lasts for days, or worse, a congestion of the brain. So it is cleaned with powder and brushing. She takes a small leather pouch and sprinkles a fine white powder onto a brush made of boar bristles. The powder is a mixture of flour, dried orris root, and powdered rose petals. It smells dusty and floral, a scent of summer preserved in the dark. She begins to brush. The rhythm is monotonous and soothing. Stroke, lift, stroke, lift. The bristles pull the powder through the hair where it absorbs the oils and dirt, carrying them away. 1, 2, 3. She counts the strokes silently. It is a meditative process requiring patience. 4, 5, 6. The sound of the bristles through her hair is a soft shushing noise like the wind in dry grass. She brushes for a long time. There is no hurry. The sun has not yet risen. The castle is asleep. The servants are likely just stirring in the kitchens below, breaking the ice on the troughs, breathing steam into the air. Here in the solar, it is just Alara, the fire, and the brush. She reaches 100 strokes. Her arms are tired, a pleasant, dull ache in the muscles. She shakes out her hair, the excess powder drifting down like a faint, fragrant snow, disappearing into the rush matting. Her hair feels lighter, cleaner, smelling of roses and earth. She moves back to the washstand. The pitcher with its lid of ice sits waiting. She picks up a metal tool, a small hammer kept for this purpose, and taps the ice. Clink, clink, crack. The sound is sharp in the quiet room. The ice fractures, revealing the dark water beneath. She does not wash her face with it. Instead, she dips the corner of a heavy towel into the water, wringing it out until it is barely damp. She takes a small pot of soap, soft soap made from mutton fat and wood ash, scented with sage. She dabs a tiny amount onto the damp cloth. She washes only the necessary parts. The face, the neck, the hands. The friction is vigorous. The cold dampness of the cloth is a shock, waking the skin, tightening the pores. She scrubs the forehead, the cheeks, the jawline. Then immediately, she takes a dry, warm towel from the rack near the fire and dries the skin thoroughly. No moisture must remain. Moisture is the conduit for the cold. She inspects her skin in the silver mirror. It is pale, clean, and dry. The ritual is effective. She feels refreshed, not by the immersion of water, but by the shedding of the night's layers and the application of friction and scent. The wind outside picks up, a low moan that vibrates against the heavy oak shutters. A draft whistles through a crack, carrying a few grains of snow that sparkle as they hit the floor and melt instantly. Ilara pulls her robe tighter. The contrast between the fire's warmth on her front and the room's chill on her back is sharp. It is time to dress. This, too, is a slow, logistical process of insulation. She removes her night shift. For a brief second, the air touches her bare skin, raising goose flesh. She reaches quickly for the day shift, fresh linen, stiff and cold from the chest. She holds it to the fire for a moment. The heat penetrates the fabric. She slips it over her head. The linen is rougher than the silk of summer, but it feels substantial. It smells of the cedar wood of the chest. Over the shift goes the kirtle, a fitted garment of wool dyed a deep, earthy green. The wool is scratchy, but the linen protects her skin. She laces the kirtle up the front. The laces are leather, stiff with cold. Her fingers fumble slightly, working the laces through the eyelets. In and out, over and under. It is a tedious task, requiring focus. The tightness of the bodice is comforting, a firm embrace that holds the warmth close to the body. Next comes the surcoat, a heavier layer, sleeveless, trimmed with rabbit fur. The fur is soft, stroking her neck. Then the woolen hose pulled up over the legs and tied with garters below the knee. The hose are thick, knitted from gray yarn. Finally, the shoes. Leather turn shoes lined with felt. She slips her feet into them, feeling the immediate insulation from the cold floor. She stands fully dressed, a statue of wool and linen. She is a fortress against the winter. She feels heavy, her movements restricted by the layers, but she also feels safe. The air in the room seems less hostile now. She has armored herself. She walks to the window and unlatches the shutter. It swings open with a groan of rusted iron. The light has changed. The gray of pre-dawn is lightening to a bruised purple on the horizon. The landscape below is a stillness of white. The courtyard is empty, save for a single set of footprints leading from the guardhouse to the gate. The snow is piled high against the well, covering the stone rim. Ilara looks at the well. She imagines the water deep down in the earth, dark and silent. She imagines the effort of drawing it up, the splashing, the inevitable soaking of sleeves and hems. She shivers, not from the cold, but from the thought of the wetness. She closes the shutter, latching it firmly, sealing the room once more against the world. She returns to the fire. The logs have caught fully now, burning with a steady, roaring confidence. She sits in the high-backed chair, carved from dark oak, padded with a velvet cushion. She picks up her embroidery frame. The needle is cold. The thread is silk, red and gold. She takes a stitch, then another. The morning has begun. There will be no bath today. There will be no bath tomorrow. Not until the sun returns, not until the ice melts from the eaves, not until the world softens. For now there is only the fire, the linen, the powder, and the dry, safe warmth of the indoors. The silence settles back over the room, interrupted only by the snap of the fire and the soft sound of the needle piercing the fabric. The world is asleep under the snow, and life inside continues, slow, dry, and enduring. The light in the room grows marginally brighter, shifting from the orange glow of the fire to the diffuse, milky light of the winter day. Ilara pauses in her stitching, her hand resting on the wooden frame. She looks at her fingernails, clean and pale. She thinks of the cellar where the apples are stored in straw, where the barrels of ale sit in the dark. She thinks of the tasks that lie ahead, checking the linen press, counting the candles, inspecting the dried herbs hanging in the pantry. All of these tasks are dry, all of them are quiet. They are the tasks of maintenance, of holding the line against the decay and the cold. She takes a deep breath, filling her lungs with the warm, smoky air. She is clean enough. She is warm enough. And in the heart of winter, that is all that matters. The candle on the table flickers, the wax pooling at the base of the wick. Ilara watches the wax melt, a slow, viscous slide. It reminds her of the passage of time in this season. Slow, thick, opaque. She picks up the needle again. Stitch, pull, stitch, pull. The rhythm becomes the heartbeat of the room. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, silently adding to the weight of the world. The solar door closes with a heavy, dull thud, a sound that seems to be swallowed instantly by the vast, cavernous silence of the corridor. Lady Alara stands for a moment, her hand resting on the iron latch, allowing her senses to adjust to the change in atmosphere. If the solar was a sanctuary of constructed warmth, the corridor is a tunnel of stone-cold reality. The air here is different. It is still, yes, but it carries a sharper edge, a biting clarity that smells of ancient mortar and the damp earth foundation deep beneath the castle. There are no windows in this stretch of the hallway, only narrow arrow loops high up on the outer wall, choked with drifted snow, admitting a feeble gray luminescence that barely qualifies as light. Shadows cling to the corners, long and stretched, seemingly frozen in place like the icicles hanging from the battlements outside. The floor is made of flagstones, great slabs of gray slate quarried from the frozen hills generations ago. They are uneven, worn smooth in the center by centuries of passing feet, and they radiate a chill that penetrates even the thick felt soles of Alara's shoes. She begins to walk. Her pace is slow, deliberate, a gliding motion designed to disturb the air as little as possible. To move quickly would be to create a wind of one's own making, a breeze that would cut through the layers of wool and fur. So she moves like a ghost, her heavy skirts sweeping the floor with a soft, rhythmic shushing sound. Swish, step, swish, step. It is the only sound in the corridor, a monotonous percussion that marks her progress towards the north wing. The walls here are hung with tapestries, but unlike the vibrant scenes in the solar, these are older, faded by time and smoke. They depict forests and hunts, the greens turned to muddy browns, the reds faded to the color of dried blood. They ripple slightly, breathing in and out as the drafts negotiate the invisible cracks in the masonry. Alara passes them without looking. She knows every thread, every faded knot. They serve a purpose, acting as a skin for the stone, trapping a thin layer of air to insulate the inner rooms. In this season, everything is insulation. Every object, every piece of fabric, every wooden shutter is enlisted in the war against the cold. She reaches the end of the corridor and stops before a sturdy door of banded oak. This is the entrance to the wardrobe, the domain of linen and cloth, the heart of the household's hygiene. In a world where water is the enemy, this room is the arsenal. She produces a key from the girdle at her waist. It is a large, heavy key, the iron cold enough to burn the fingers. She fits it into the lock. The mechanism is stiff. She applies pressure, turning it slowly. The metal grinds against metal, a low, complaining growl, grrr click. The bolt slides back. She pushes the door open. The smell hits her instantly, a wall of fragrance that is dry, pungent, and overwhelmingly clean. It is the scent of lavender, dried bushels of it, mixed with the sharp medicinal tang of wormwood and the dusty sweetness of dried rose petals. Beneath it all is the fundamental smell of the room, cedar wood and huge quantities of dry fabric. It is a smell that means safety. It is a smell that means order. Alara steps inside and closes the door quickly behind her, preserving the atmosphere. The room is large, lined from floor to ceiling with shelves of pale, unpolished wood. In the center stands a large table, its surface scrubbed white with sand and lye. A small brazier sits in the corner, burning charcoal, not wood, to minimize smoke. It gives off a steady, gentle heat, just enough to keep the dampness at bay. Damp is the true enemy here. If the damp gets into the linen, the rot follows and the mold, and the smell of decay. A servant, a young woman named Agnes, is already there. She stands by the table, her head bowed in concentration. She does not look up as Ilara enters. The rhythm of her work is too hypnotic to break. She is pressing a sheet. The process is slow and mesmerizing. Agnes holds a smoothing stone, a heavy, round glass weight shaped like a mushroom. She moves it back and forth across the white linen spread over the table. Rub, slide, rub, slide. The glass creates friction, generating a minute amount of heat, flattening the fibers of the flax, polishing the cloth until it shines with a dull, satin luster. Ilara watches her for a moment. The sound is soothing, a low, repetitive friction. Scrape, smooth, scrape, smooth. It is the sound of cleanliness. This is how the linens are prepared for the body. The pressing seals the surface, making it smooth against the skin, less likely to harbor dust or pests. Ilara moves to the shelves. Here lies the wealth of the household. It is not gold or silver, but flax. Acres of it, harvested in the summer, redded in the river, spun by winter fires and woven on the great looms in the village. It is stacked here in precise, towering columns. There are the sheets, folded into tight squares, their edges aligned with mathematical precision. There are the napkins, diapered with geometric patterns. There are the tablecloths, long enough to cover the high table in the great hall. And there are the shifts, the undergarments, the second skins. Ilara reaches out and touches a stack of shifts. The linen is cool to the touch, but not cold. It feels dry, supremely dry. She runs her finger along the folded edge. The fabric is coarse yet smooth, the weave tight. She counts them silently. 1, 2, 3, 4. She lifts the top shift. It unfolds with a crisp rustle, a sound like dry leaves skittering over ice. She inspects it. The fabric is an off-white, the natural color of unbleached flax, though the sun of last summer has lightened it to the color of heavy cream. She holds it up to the light of the narrow window. The weave is even. There are no holes, no thin spots. She brings the fabric to her face and inhales. It smells of the cedar shelf and the sachet of herbs tucked between the folds. It smells of nothing human. No sweat, no smoke, no food. Just the pure, plant-based scent of the flax and the preservation herbs. This is the ideal. To wear this is to reset the body's scent. She folds it back up. The folding is a ritual in itself. She lays the shift on the edge of the table. She smooths it flat with her hand, swish. She folds one sleeve in, pat. She folds the other sleeve in, pat. She folds the hem up, smooth. She folds it in half, press. The air is squeezed out from between the layers. The garment becomes a solid, compact brick of cloth. She places it back on the stack and moves to the next shelf. Here are the herbs. In the winter, the garden is dead, buried under 3 feet of snow. But in the wardrobe, the garden is preserved in death. Hanging from the rafters are bunches of dried plants, tied with twine. They are gray and brittle, rustling when the heat from the brazier rises to meet them. Ilara picks up a basket from the floor. It is filled with dried lavender buds, millions of tiny purple-gray grains. She plunges her hand into the basket. The sensation is exquisite. The buds are cool and grainy, flowing around her fingers like dry water. She moves her hand through them, disturbing the oils. The scent explodes into the air, sharp and floral. It is a powerful soporific, the smell of sleep. She takes a small linen bag no bigger than her palm and begins to fill it. She uses a wooden scoop. Scoop, pour, scoop, pour. The sound of the dry buds hitting the bottom of the bag is a soft rain. Chkshhh. Chkshhh. She fills the bag until it is plump. She takes a piece of ribbon and ties the neck of the bag tight. She pulls the knot firm. Then she kneads the bag gently between her fingers, crushing the buds slightly to release more scent. She places the finished sachet on a tray. She repeats the process: scoop, pour, tie, knead. It is monotonous work. There is no challenge in it. There is no danger. It is simply the maintenance of the atmosphere. Yet it is vital. These sachets will be placed in the chests between the blankets under the pillows. They fight the moths. They fight the stale air. They fight the winter depression. Agnes continues her polishing at the table. Rub, slide, rub, slide. The rhythm enters Ilara's mind, syncing with her own breathing. The room feels timeless. The light from the window does not seem to change. It is a perpetual gray afternoon. Ilara moves to the chest where the bath sheets are kept. These are large, heavy squares of rough linen, meant for the rare occasions of a sponge bath or for drying hair. She opens the heavy lid of the chest. The hinges groan. Inside, the sheets are piled high. She checks the bottom layer. She pushes her hand deep down the side of the stack, feeling for the wood of the chest floor. It must be dry. If moisture collects at the bottom, it ruins everything. Her fingers touch the wood. It is dry, dusty but dry. She withdraws her hand. She picks up a bundle of woodruff, dried leaves that smell of fresh hay and vanilla. She crumbles a few leaves in her hand. They turn to powder. She sprinkles the green dust over the sheets. It settles into the weave, disappearing. The silence of the room is thick, insulated by the thousands of layers of cloth surrounding them. It is a muffled silence, cozy and heavy. The stone walls are hidden behind the shelves. The floor is covered in a thick rush matting, woven so tight it feels like a carpet. Ilara walks over to the brazier. The coals are glowing a dull, steady red, covered in a fine layer of white ash. She holds her hands out to it. The heat is dry, unlike the humid heat of the kitchen. It warms her palms, but the air around her remains cool. She watches a single spark rise from the coals, drifting up towards the drying herbs, fading and dying before it reaches them. She looks at the rows of white linen. In this light, they look like snowdrifts, sculpted and rectangular. They are the indoor snow, warm and dry, contrasting the wet, freezing snow outside. She thinks about the water in the well again. The thought is intrusive. Wet, heavy, cold, she pushes it away. Here there is only dryness. The linen absorbs, the lavender preserves, the cedar protects. She turns back to the table. Agnes has finished one sheet and is reaching for another. She unfolds it. The snap of the fabric is loud in the quiet room. She lays it out. She picks up the glass mushroom. She begins again. Rub, slide, rub, slide. Ilara picks up a piece of charcoal from a small box near the brazier. She moves to a slate hanging on the wall. It is the inventory list. She marks a small tally next to the entry for winter shifts. The sound of the chalk on slate is scratchy and low. Scritch, scratch. She stares at the list. Numbers, columns, order. There are 142 sheets. There are 60 pillovers. There are 48 napkins. The numbers are comforting. They represent abundance. They represent preparation. As long as the numbers are high, the winter cannot touch them. She stands there for a long time, just looking at the slate, the white marks floating in the gray darkness of the stone. Her breathing is slow. The smell of lavender is heavy in her lungs, making her eyelids feel heavy. The heat from the brazier warms the back of her legs. The work of the wardrobe is never done, but it is never urgent. It is a circle. Use, wash, dry, press, fold, store, use. The linen moves through the house like a slow, white river. But today the river is frozen. The stocks are full. The house is quiet. She walks over to the window slit. It is narrow, barely wide enough for a hand. She can see a slice of the courtyard wall. The snow has stopped falling, but the sky is a flat, oppressive white. A bird, a black crow, sits on the wall, motionless, its feathers fluffed up against the cold. It looks like a stone carving. It does not move. Ilara turns away. She does not want to look at the cold. She wants to look at the linen. She goes to a shelf of woolens. These are the blankets, thick, heavy, scratchy wool dyed in deep reds and blues. They smell of the sheep, a faint, oily lanolin smell that persists even after washing. She runs her hand over the pile. The wool is rough against her skin, catching slightly on her fingertips. It is a different kind of warmth than the linen. It is an aggressive warmth, a heat trapper. She checks the edges for fraying. She finds a loose thread on a blue blanket. She pulls a small pair of iron scissors from her belt. Snip. The sound is tiny. She puts the thread in her pocket. She adjusts the pile, squaring the corners, making sure they are perfectly aligned with the edge of the shelf. She steps back to admire the symmetry. It is perfect. A wall of soft, warm geometry. The room is getting warmer as the brazier continues to burn. The smell of the herbs seems to be intensifying in the heat, becoming almost visible in the air. Ilara feels a wave of drowsiness. It is the specific, safe drowsiness of a winter afternoon spent indoors. She nods to Agnes. No words are spoken. None are needed. The work continues. The rhythm holds. Ilara moves back towards the door. She places her hand on the iron latch. It is still cold, a reminder of the corridor beyond. She lingers for a moment, breathing in the lavender one last time, filling her memory with the dryness of the room. She opens the door. The cold air of the corridor rushes in to meet her, swirling around her ankles. She steps out. She pulls the door closed. Click. The latch engages. The scent of the wardrobe is cut off, replaced by the stone smell of the castle. She turns. The long, gray tunnel of the corridor stretches out before her. She begins the walk back, her steps silent, her mind filled with the image of white linen stacked in the dark, safe and dry, waiting for the night. A swish, step, swish, step. The corridor eventually gives way to a narrow, spiraling staircase, a coil of stone that twists its way down into the belly of the manor. This is the spine of the house, a vertical tunnel where the air grows colder with every descending step. The stone here is rougher, less finished than in the solar or the guest wings. It is the domain of the servants and the practical workings of the household, where aesthetics bow to the brute strength of masonry. Lady Alara places her hand on the central pillar of the stairwell. The stone is slick with a thin film of condensation, a weeping dampness that speaks of the earth pressing in from all sides. She descends slowly. The steps are wedge-shaped, narrow at the center and wide at the wall, worn into shallow depressions by generations of leather soles. Step, pivot, step, pivot. Her heavy skirts brush against the curved walls, collecting the dust of the stone, making a soft swish-shh sound that echoes up the shaft. There is no light here but what filters down from the arrow loops above and the faint, warm glow emanating from the archway at the bottom. She counts the steps as she goes, a habit born of the dark mornings. 18, 19, 20. The air changes as she nears the bottom. The smell of cold stone and damp earth begins to recede, replaced by something richer, warmer, and infinitely more complex. It is the scent of the still room. The still room is a small, low-ceilinged chamber tucked between the kitchens and the buttery. It is the pharmacy, the laboratory, and the perfumery of the manor. In the winter, when the windows are sealed tight against the frost, the air inside is thick enough to taste. It smells of beeswax, rendered tallow, dried sage, crushed juniper berries, and the sharp, biting tang of vinegar. Alara steps through the archway. The room is warm, heated by a wide, blackened hearth where a fire burns low and steady. A copper cauldron hangs from a hook, but it is not boiling. It is merely keeping its contents, a mixture of water and aromatic herbs, at a gentle simmer, releasing steam that keeps the air humid and fragrant. This humidity is a mercy to the skin, which has been parched by the dry heat of the solar and the biting wind of the courtyard. The walls are lined with wooden shelves, sagging under the weight of stoneware jars, glass vials, and bundles of dried roots that look like gnarled brown fingers. There is a large work table in the center, scarred by knives and stained with oils. Alara moves to the table. Today's task is the preparation of the winter balm. In a season where bathing is dangerous and water is scarce, the skin must be protected, sealed against the chapping wind and the cracking cold. The balm is the barrier. It is the shield. She pulls a high stool closer to the table. The wood scrapes against the flagstones, screech, a harsh sound that is quickly swallowed by the room's clutter. She sits, arranging her skirts around her to trap the warmth of the fire. On the table sits a block of beeswax. It is a solid, pale yellow brick, harvested from the manor's hives in the late summer. It smells of honey and sun-warmed clover, a ghostly memory of a season that feels impossible now. Alara picks up a small knife, its handle made of antler. She begins to shave pieces of the wax into a small earthenware bowl. Scrape, curl, drop. The knife bites into the wax. A thin, yellow curl rises up, translucent against the blade before falling into the bowl. Scrape, curl, drop. It is a precise, repetitive motion. The wax is hard from the cold of the storage room, but it yields to the steel. She needs exactly enough to fill 3 small pots. She watches the pile of shavings grow, a mound of golden flakes. Next to the wax, there is a jar of mutton tallow, rendered fat purified until it is white and odorless. This is the base. It is greasy, rich, and deeply moisturizing. Alara uses a wooden spoon to scoop a dollop of the tallow. It is stiff, resisting the spoon. She presses down. The fat gives way with a soft squelch. She adds it to the bowl with the wax. She stands and carries the bowl to the hearth. There is a trivet set over the embers, a 3-legged iron stand. She places the bowl upon it. Now she must wait. She watches the melting. It is a slow transformation. At first, nothing happens. The bowl sits dark and solid. Then the tallow begins to sweat. A shine appears on the surface of the white fat. The yellow wax shavings begin to soften, their edges blurring. Drip, slide. The solid mass begins to slump. The white and the yellow merge, swirling together into a golden liquid. A tiny bubble rises to the surface and pops plip. Another follows, plip. The scent of the warm wax fills the space immediately around the hearth, sweet and heavy. It is a comforting smell, the smell of sealing and protection. While the base melts, Alara returns to the table to prepare the infusion. She opens a small wooden box. Inside lie dried marigold petals, orange and shriveled. She takes a pinch between her fingers. They are brittle, crumbling slightly. She drops them into a stone mortar. She adds a few drops of oil from a green glass vial, oil of rosemary pressed weeks ago. The scent is sharp, camphorous, clearing the head. It cuts through the sweetness of the wax. She picks up the pestle. It is heavy, made of gray granite. She begins to grind. Grind, crunch, grind. The stone pestle crushes the dried petals against the stone mortar. The sound is gritty, a rough friction, scritch crunch. She works the pestle in a circular motion, breaking down the plant matter, forcing the essential oils of the flower to mix with the rosemary oil. The result is a thick, orange-flecked paste. It smells medicinal and earthy. She returns to the fire. The wax and tallow are fully melted now, a clear, golden pool. She takes a thick cloth to protect her hand and lifts the bowl from the trivet. She carries it back to the table, moving carefully so as not to spill a drop. The liquid sloshes gently, viscous and hot. She pours the herb paste into the hot oil. There is a sudden sizzle, a brief, angry sound as the moisture in the herbs meets the hot fat. Tiny bubbles froth up. She stirs it with a glass rod. Clink. Swirl. Clink. The mixture turns a deep, cloudy yellow, suspended with flecks of orange marigold. Now comes the pouring. She has 3 small pots lined up. They are made of turned wood, smooth and round, with tight-fitting lids. She pours the liquid slowly. Pour. The stream is steady, thick like syrup. It fills the first pot. She stops just before the brim. The surface tension holds the liquid in a perfect, convex dome. Stop. She moves to the second pot. Pour. The sound of the liquid hitting the bottom of the pot is different, deeper, then rising in pitch as it fills. Stop. And the third, pour, stop. She sets the bowl down. There is a thin film of cooling wax left on the sides, already turning opaque, hardening back into a solid. The transition from liquid to solid is rapid in the cool air of the room. She watches the pots. The liquid is still, but as it cools, it changes color. The edges begin to cloud over first, turning a creamy pale yellow. The cloudiness creeps inward, a slow fog consuming the clear gold. She sits and watches this process. It takes time. To move the pots now would be to disturb the setting to make the surface uneven. Perfection is required. A smooth surface means a good seal. A good seal means the balm will last until spring. The room is quiet, save for the simmering of the cauldron and the settling of the coals in the grate. Ilara rests her chin in her hand. Her eyes trace the grain of the wood on the table. It is ancient wood, its rings dark and tight. She counts the rings on a knot near her elbow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The years of the tree, the years of the winter. She looks at her hands. The skin on her knuckles is red from the cold of the stairwell. She longs to dip her finger into the cooling balm to feel the soothing grease, but she must wait. It is too hot. She looks up at the ceiling. Bunches of dried herbs hang there, silhouetted against the gloom of the upper reaches. Sage, thyme, hyssop, mugwort, they are the ghosts of the garden suspended in time. Occasionally, a dry leaf detaches itself and drifts down, rocking back and forth on the air currents, landing silently on the floor. A mouse skitters somewhere behind the wainscoting. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then silence. The house is full of these small, hidden lives, all seeking the same warmth, the same shelter. The balm is nearly set. The centers of the pots are the only parts that remain translucent. Ilara touches the side of the first wooden pot. It is warm, radiant. It feels like a living thing. She picks up the lids. They are screw-top carved with simple grooves. She tests the first one on the cooled pot. Twist, squeak. The wood is tight. She twists it until it locks. The balm is sealed. She does the same for the others. Twist, squeak, twist, squeak. 3 pots of winter balm, 1 for her bedside, 1 for the Lord's chamber, 1 for the nursery. They are small things, insignificant in the grand scheme of the kingdom, but here, inside the walls, they are vital. They are the difference between comfort and pain. They are the substitute for the bath. Instead of washing away the dirt with water, they will seal the skin, coating it in a protective layer that repels the dirt and the cold alike. Ilara stands up. Her legs are stiff from sitting. She stretches, her spine cracking softly. She picks up the dirty bowl and the spoon. She takes them to a basin in the corner. She cannot wash them now. The water in the basin is cold and greasy. She scrapes the excess wax out with a wooden spatula, saving it for the fire starters. Nothing is wasted. She wipes her hands on her apron. They feel waxy, coated in a thin, accidental layer of the balm. She rubs them together. The warmth of her friction melts the residue and she works it into her cuticles. It feels good. It feels safe. She walks to the window. The glass is thick, distorted, filled with bubbles and waves. Through it, the world outside is a blur of white and gray. A single icicle hangs directly in front of the pane, thick as her arm. It is clear as crystal, terrifyingly sharp. A drop of water forms at its tip. It hangs there for what seems like an hour, trembling, heavy, fighting gravity. Ilara holds her breath. The drop falls, she exhales. Another drop begins to form. She turns away from the window. The task is done. The still room has served its purpose. The air here is too heavy, too sleep-inducing. She needs to move. She needs to check the fires in the great hall. She walks back to the archway, her skirts brushing the floor. She pauses to look back at the 3 small pots sitting on the table. They look like soldiers, sentinels of the skin. She steps out into the stairwell again. The cold hits her, but this time her hands are coated in wax and she feels invincible. She begins the climb up, or perhaps the descent further. The hall is below. Yes, down. Down to the great stone heart of the house where the logs are the size of men. A step, pivot. The darkness of the stairwell swallows her once more, but the scent of rosemary and beeswax follows her, a trailing ghost of the summer garden in the depth of the winter freeze. The spiral staircase widens at its base, spilling out into the vast, cavernous expanse of the great hall. If the solar is the mind of the castle, and the kitchen's the stomach, the great hall is its lungs, a massive breathing space that inhales the cold drafts from the courtyard and exhales the wood smoke of the central hearth. Lady Ilara steps off the final stone riser, her foot sinking slightly into the deep layer of floor coverings. The floor here is not stone, or rather, the stone is buried. It is lost beneath a sea of winter rushes. These are not the fresh, green stems of summer, pliable and sweet-smelling. These are the winter rushes, dried, golden-brown, brittle stalks of meadow sedge and cattail, harvested in the autumn and stored in the loft of the barn until they achieved a texture like parchment. They have been laid down in thick, overlapping mats, layer upon layer, creating a sprung floor that insulates the feet from the freezing earth below. Ilara stands still, letting the sensory landscape of the hall wash over her. It is dimmer here than in the solar. The windows are high up, narrow lancets filled with horn or thick, wavery glass that admits only a bruised gray twilight. The light does not reach the corners. They are swallowed by deep, velvety shadows that seem to have mass and weight. The air is cooler, a vast reservoir of chill that the fire can push back but never truly defeat. She begins to walk across the rushes. The sound is distinct and loud in the quiet room. Crunch, rustle, snap. It is the sound of walking through dry autumn leaves, but sharper, amplified by the stone acoustics. Each step breaks 100 tiny dried fibers. Crunch, swish, snap. She moves towards the center of the room, towards the gravity that holds the household together, the fire. It is not merely a fire. It is an architectural feature. The hearth is a raised stone platform in the center of the hall, wide enough to roast a whole ox, though now it holds only the winter log. This is a massive trunk of seasoned oak, dragged in by 4 horses 3 days ago. It is the size of a man, dark and gnarled, its bark rough like the skin of a dragon. It does not burn with a frantic, consuming flame. It burns with a slow, deep, terrifying heat. It glows. The underside of the log is a pulsating heart of cherry-red coals, a landscape of intense thermal energy. Above, blue and violet flames lick lazily along the length of the wood, searching for sap pockets. Occasionally, a pocket ruptures, pop, sending a shower of bright orange sparks spiraling up towards the smoke hole in the high roof, 60 feet above. The sparks drift upward, stars in a dark wooden sky, fading and dying before they reach the beams. Ilara approaches the fire, extending her hands. The heat is a physical wall. It pushes against her palms, her face, her heavy woolen skirts. It smells of oak tannin and the deep, resinous scent of centuries of soot. This heat is the only bath the castle knows in winter. It cleanses the air. It dries the damp. It purifies. Near the hearth, a servant is performing the midday ritual of the floor. In a world without water for washing, the floor must be sweetened. The old rushes, trampled and dusty, must be refreshed. The servant, an old man named Thomas, moves with the slow, aching stiffness of the season. He carries a wide, flat basket woven from willow. Ilara watches him. He dips his hand into the basket. He pulls out a handful of dried herbs, not rushes this time, but strewing herbs, meadowsweet, lavender, hyssop, chamomile. They are dried to a gray-green crumble. He casts them across the floor with a wide, sweeping motion of his arm. Swish! The herbs fly through the air, catching the light of the fire, a dusty green rain. They settle onto the rushes with a whisper of sound. Shh-tick. He takes a step. Crunch, he dips his hand. Rustle, he casts. Swish. Ilara closes her eyes and listens. The rhythm is hypnotic. It is the sound of maintenance. It is the sound of covering the old with the new. The herbs hit the floor and release tiny bursts of scent. The chamomile smells of apples and dust. The hyssop is minty and sharp. The meadowsweet is heavy, like almond paste. These scents rise up, mixing with the wood smoke. They are the perfume of the house. They mask the smell of the dogs, the smoke, and the unwashed bodies of the household. They create a barrier of fragrance, a dry herbal shield that stands in for soap. Ilara opens her eyes and looks down at the floor near her feet. She sees a sprig of dried lavender flattened by a passing boot. Its tiny purple buds are crushed, spilling their oil into the dry rushes. She bends down, the wool of her kirtle groaning as the fabric folds. She picks up the sprig. It is light, almost weightless. She rolls it between her thumb and forefinger. The scent is faint but persistent. She drops it back onto the pile. She walks around the fire to the other side of the hearth. Here, the great wolfhounds are sleeping. There are 3 of them, massive piles of rough gray fur. They lie in a heap, limbs tangled together, indistinguishable from one another. They are heat sinks. They absorb the fire's warmth and radiate it back. Ilara stops to look at them. One of the dogs, a sprawling giant named Miller, is dreaming. His paws twitch against the rushes. Scritch, scritch. His ears flicker. He lets out a low, muffled woof in his sleep, a ghost bark chasing a ghost rabbit in a dream summer. She can see his ribs rising and falling beneath the coarse coat. In, out, in, out. The rhythm is slow, deep, and incredibly peaceful. It is the breathing of a creature that is perfectly warm, perfectly safe, and perfectly bored. She carefully steps over his tail, which lies like a thick gray rope across the path. He does not wake. He merely sighs, a long exhalation through his nose that ruffles the dust on the floor. HFFFFFFF. She reaches the high table set upon a dais at the far end of the hall. It is empty now, a long expanse of polished oak, dark as molasses. There is no cloth laid yet. The wood gleams dully in the firelight. She runs her hand along the edge of the table. It is smooth, worn down by elbows and knives and goblets over 200 years. The wood is cool but not freezing. It has absorbed some of the room's ambient warmth. She sits on the bench behind the table. It is hard, but a velvet cushion has been left there. She settles onto it. From here, she can see the entire hall. She can see the fire in the center, a glowing eye in the gloom. She can see Thomas moving slowly in the distance, still casting his herbs. Swish, step, swish. She feels the draft now. It is a subtle current of air, winding its way through the hall like a cold snake. It comes from the main doors at the far end, seeping through the iron-bound cracks. It creeps along the floor under the rushes, chilling the ankles. Ilara lifts her feet onto the footrest beneath the table, elevating them out of the draft. She wraps her arms around herself, tucking her hands into her sleeves. This is the posture of winter, the self-hug. It conserves heat. It rounds the shoulders. It closes the body. She looks up at the rafters. They are lost in the darkness, vast beams of timber that hold up the roof. Somewhere up there, high above the smoke, birds are roosting. She can hear them occasionally, a rustle of feathers, a tiny cheep, sparrows that have found a way in. They too are part of the household now. They share the warmth. They share the smoke. The smoke itself is a presence. It hangs in a distinct layer about 10 feet off the ground, a blue-gray blanket that hovers, trapped by the thermal dynamics of the room. It does not descend, thankfully, but it creates a ceiling of haze. It softens the light, blurring the edges of the stone pillars. It smells of the forest, of burning sap and char. It is a preservative. Just as smoke preserves the ham hanging in the chimney, it preserves the people. It coats the skin in a microscopic layer of soot and carbon. It is another dry layer, another barrier. Ilara watches a dust mote floating in a shaft of light that has managed to pierce the gloom. The mote dances, spinning in the convection current rising from the fire. Up, down, spiral. It glitters like a tiny diamond, then vanishes into the shadow. She thinks of the preparations for the evening meal. It will be simple: roasted root vegetables, salted meat, bread, nothing fresh. There is nothing fresh in the world. The diet, like the hygiene, is preserved, dried, salted, stored. The food heats the body from the inside just as the fire heats it from the out. The heavy, salty food creates thirst, which is quenched with ale, not water. Water is suspicious. Water is cold. Ale is warming, fermented, safe. She leans her head back against the carved wood of the wall behind her. The vibration of the castle settles into her bones. It is a low, rumbling hum, composed of the wind outside, the fire inside, and the settling of the massive stones. Ithramum. It is a heavy, sleepy sound. Her eyelids flutter. The warmth of the fire, even from this distance, is a soporific weight. The smell of the meadowsweet is cloying and rich. She watches Thomas reach the end of the hall. He turns, his basket nearly empty. He stops to pick something up from the floor, a bone, perhaps dropped by the dogs. He tosses it into the fire. Ilara watches the bone arc through the air. It lands on the red coals. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the grease in the bone catches. A bright yellow flame spurts up, dancing frantically for a few seconds before dying back down. Flicker, die. The repetition of the day is absolute. There are no surprises. The sun moves across the sky, invisible behind the clouds. The shadows in the hall shift, lengthening, turning from gray to black. The fire consumes the log inch by inch. The ash builds up, a gray drift against the red coals. Ilara's breathing slows to match the rhythm of the dog, in, out. She thinks of the bath again. The idea of it seems absurd here. To introduce a tub of water into this equilibrium of dry heat and dust would be a violence. It would steam, it would spill. It would make the rushes soggy and rot the floor. It would strip the oil from her skin and leave her defenseless against the draft. No, the dry way is the only way. The linen, the powder, the smoke, the herbs. She adjusts her sleeve. The wool scratches her wrist. It is a familiar sensation, a constant reminder of the barrier between her skin and the world. She pulls the sleeve down, covering her knuckles. The silence of the hall deepens. The servants have moved into the shadows of the buttery. Thomas has gone. It is just Ilara, the fire, and the dogs. Crack, a loud report from the fire. A knot in the wood explodes. A piece of charcoal rolls out onto the stone hearth. It glows fiercely, isolated, dying. Ilara watches it fade. Red to orange, orange to dull red to gray, gray to black. It takes minutes. She watches every second of the transition. It is the only thing happening in the world. She feels a profound sense of boredom. It is a thick, woolen boredom, comfortable and suffocating. It is the boredom of safety. There is nothing to do because everything has been done. The harvest is in. The doors are barred. The wood is chopped. There is only the waiting, waiting for spring, waiting for the sun, waiting for the next meal. She lifts her hand and brushes a stray lock of hair from her forehead. The hair is smooth, heavy with the powder she brushed into it this morning. It smells of roses. The scent is a tiny, personal summer in the midst of the winter hall. She stands up. The movement is stiff. She needs to walk again. To sit too long is to let the cold seep into the joints. She steps down from the dais back onto the rushes. Grunge swish. She walks towards the fire again. The heat grows with every step. She stops at the edge of the hearth stones. The heat is intense here, flushing her cheeks. She turns her back to the fire, lifting her skirts slightly behind her to let the warmth reach her legs. This is the fire bath. She stands there, letting the radiation soak into her wool layers. The fabric absorbs the heat, storing it. She closes her eyes and imagines the heat as a liquid, pouring into the weave of her clothes, filling the spaces between the threads. She is charging herself like a stone in the sun. She sways slightly, rocked by the waves of heat. Warmth, safety, sleep. The hall stretches out before her, a tunnel of shadows. The dust motes dance. The smoke hangs. The world is still. The great oak doors at the far end of the hall groan. A low, protesting sound of wood against iron hinges that reverberates through the quiet air. Kriyak. A sliver of the outside world slices into the dim warmth. A blinding, horizontal bar of white light accompanied by a swirl of snow that dances briefly in the threshold before dying on the stone flags. A figure enters, stomping their feet. Thump, thump. The door is shoved closed again, sealing the breach, but the temperature in the hall drops perceptibly for a moment, a phantom breath of the frozen courtyard. It is time to retreat. The hall, for all its grandeur, is too porous, too susceptible to these sudden intrusions of the wild. Lady Alara turns away from the fire, gathering her heavy skirts in both hands. She moves towards the small door behind the dais, the entrance to the solar stairs. Her destination is the kitchens, but not by the main route. She will take the servants' passage, a narrow, stone-lined artery that runs behind the great chimney stack, borrowing its heat. She opens the door. The air in the passage is thick, dry, and smells of old soot and warm brick. It is dark here, lit only by the occasional crack in the masonry that reveals the glowing back of a fireplace in an adjacent room. She walks slowly, feeling her way with one hand against the rough, warm wall. The stone vibrates slightly under her fingertips, humming with the draft of the massive fires burning on either side. The passage slopes downward. The floor is packed earth, hard as iron, silent under her felt shoes. Pat, pat, pat. She descends into the bowels of the house, moving towards the source of all heat and sustenance. As she nears the kitchen, the silence begins to fracture. It is replaced by a low, chaotic murmur, the sound of 40 people working in a confined space. But it is a muffled sound, dampened by the heavy air and the stone vaulting. She pushes open a heavy wooden door and steps onto a gallery overlooking the main kitchen. The scene below is a masterpiece of organized chaos, a warm, humid, fire-lit world that stands in stark contrast to the dry silence of the upper floors. The kitchen is a cathedral of food. The ceiling is high, vaulted with stone ribs that are black with centuries of smoke. From these ribs hang forests of dried herbs, strings of onions, braided garlic, and whole hams, their fat glistening in the heat. In the center of the room are 3 massive fireplaces, each large enough to roast a whole sheep. They are all roaring. The heat here is not just warm, it is tropical. It is a wet, heavy heat, thick with the smell of roasting meat, boiling cabbage, baking bread, and the sweat of the cooks. Ilara leans on the wooden railing of the gallery. She watches the movement below. It is a ballet of labor. Scullions run back and forth with buckets of water that is finally liquid here, sloshing over the rims, dark and reflective. Cooks shout orders, their voices lost in the roar of the fires and the clanging of iron pots. She focuses on a woman near the baking oven. The woman is kneading dough. It is a massive mound of pale, sticky flour and water on a wooden table. She pushes her fists into it. Thump, squish, fold, turn. Thump, squish, fold, turn. The rhythm is relentless. The woman's arms are dusted with flour, white up to the elbows. Her face is flushed red from the heat of the oven, beads of sweat standing on her forehead. She pauses to wipe her brow with her forearm, leaving a streak of white across her skin. Ilara watches the dough. It is alive. It resists, then yields. It is warm and elastic. It is the opposite of the frozen earth outside. It is the promise of bread. Further down, near the largest hearth, a spit boy turns the handle of a roasting mechanism. He sits on a low stool, his eyes glazed with boredom and heat. He turns the handle slowly, monotonously. Crank, squeak, crank, squeak. On the spit, a line of geese turn with the handle. Their skin is browning, the fat rendering out and dripping into a long metal pan below. Drip, sizzle, hiss. The sound is constant. Drip, sizzle, drip, sizzle. The smell of the roasting goose fat rises up to the gallery. It is rich, savory, and overwhelming. It coats the back of Alara's throat. It is a heavy smell, a smell that makes the eyelids droop. She moves along the gallery to where the laundry is done. In winter, the main laundry is moved indoors, into a side alcove of the kitchen to prevent the water from freezing. Here, the air is thick with steam. It swirls in white clouds, obscuring the stone walls. 3 women stand over large wooden tubs. They are washing the table linens. The water in the tubs is hot, heated by stones from the fire. The women plunge their red, raw hands into the soapy water. They scrub the linen against washboards. Scrub, scrub, splash. Scrub, scrub, splash. The sound of the water is hypnotic. It is a violent, churning sound, yet rhythmic. The steam rises up, carrying the smell of lye soap, sharp and clean, cutting through the grease of the kitchen. Alara watches the steam. It condenses on the cold stone of the gallery railing, forming tiny droplets. She touches one with her finger. It is warm. This is the wettest place in the castle. It is the only place where water flows freely. But it is a working wetness, not a leisurely one. There are no baths here for pleasure. The tubs are for linen, not for bodies. The water is gray with lye and grease. She turns away from the laundry and looks back at the main kitchen floor. A cat, a ragged tom with one ear, weaves its way through the legs of the cooks. It stops near a puddle of spilled milk. It lowers its head. Lap, lap, lap. Alara watches the pink tongue dart out. The rhythm is fast, efficient. The milk disappears. The cat pauses, licks its whiskers, and moves on, seeking a warm spot near the hearth. It finds a pile of firewood and curls up on top of it. Within seconds, it is asleep. Alara feels a kinship with the cat. She, too, is seeking the warmest spot. She moves to the far end of the gallery, where the heat from the baking ovens collects in a pocket of stagnant air. There is a bench here, used by the frantic cooks for moments of rest. It is empty now. She sits. The wall behind her is warm to the touch, heated by the oven flue on the other side. She leans back, closing her eyes. The sounds of the kitchen wash over her, blending into a single, continuous drone. Thump dough, sizzle fat, splash water, roar fire, clang pot. It is a white noise of domesticity. It is the sound of survival. She breathes in deeply. The air tastes of yeast. The yeast is rising in the heat, multiplying, filling the space with the smell of life. It is a sour, comforting smell. She thinks about the water outside, frozen in the pond. She thinks about the fish, suspended in the ice, waiting. She thinks about the frogs buried in the mud, their hearts beating once a minute. Here in the kitchen, life is accelerated. The fire beats fast. The water boils. The dough rises. But for Alara, watching from above, it is a slow-motion spectacle. She is detached. She is warm. She is clean in her dry, powdered way. She opens her eyes and looks at her hands. They are still pale, untouched by the soot and grease below. She rubs her thumb over her fingertips. They are dry. The skin is smooth. A servant walks below carrying a tray of pies. The crusts are golden brown, steaming. The smell of hot apples and cinnamon drifts up. It is sweet and spicy. Ilara's stomach gives a small rumble, but she ignores it. The hunger is dull, easily suppressed. The warmth is more important. She watches the smoke from the fires. It gathers in the vaulting, a dark cloud that shifts and eddies with the drafts. It is slowly blackening the stone, layer by layer, year by year. The history of the castle is written in soot. She stays there for a long time. The light in the high windows fades from gray to a deep blue. The kitchen activity begins to change. The roasting is done. The baking is finishing. The scullions are beginning to scrape the pots. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound of metal on metal, it is harsh but rhythmic. Scrape. Ring, scrape, ring. The noise level drops slightly. The shouting ceases. The cooks are tired. They move slower. The pace of the kitchen slows down to match the pace of the evening. Ilara stands up. The bench has made her stiff. She stretches, her hands reaching up towards the smoke. She feels heavy, saturated with the heat and the smells. Her wool dress feels thicker, as if it has absorbed the moisture of the air. She turns to leave. She will not go back through the cold passage. She will take the main stairs up from the buttery. It is a longer route, but it passes the warm chimneys of the lower guest rooms. She takes one last look at the kitchen. The fires are being banked down for the night, covered with ash to keep the coals alive until morning. The light is dimmer, redder. The shadows are longer. The cat is still asleep on the woodpile. The spit boy has stopped turning the handle. The geese are gone. She opens the door to the gallery exit. The air in the stairwell is cooler, but it feels fresh after the heavy atmosphere of the kitchen. She steps out, closing the door on the noise and the steam. Silence returns, the heavy stone silence of the stairwell. Step, step, step. She ascends, carrying the warmth of the kitchen with her like a secret, wrapped in her layers of wool and linen. The day is ending. The long, dark night of the castle is beginning, and she is ready for it. She is warm. She is dry. The narrow door from the kitchen gallery opens into a quieter, more austere section of the manor. The undercroft passage leading to the great hall's rear entrance. Lady Ilara steps through, the heavy oak door thudding softly into its frame behind her, muting the chaotic symphony of the kitchens to a dull, rhythmic murmur. Here, the air is still and cool, smelling of damp stone, and the faint, earthy scent of stored root vegetables rising from the cellars below. She pauses to adjust her eyes to the gloom. There are no windows here, only a single tallow candle sputtering in a wall sconce, its flame struggling against a draft that whistles through the mortar. The light is weak, casting long, wavering shadows that seem to detach themselves from the walls and dance in the periphery of her vision. She pulls her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the familiar prickle of the fabric against her neck. Her destination is the solar once more, but the route is circuitous, winding through the domestic heart of the house. She walks slowly, her soft leather shoes making no sound on the packed earth floor. Pat, pat, pat. The silence is heavy, a tangible weight that presses against her ears. She passes the door to the buttery. It is ajar, revealing rows of wooden barrels stacked against the walls. A servant is inside, tapping a cask of ale. Thump, thump, splash. The sound of the mallet striking the tap is dull and resonant. The smell of yeast and hops wafts out, sour and comforting. It is the smell of sustenance, of warmth generated from within. Ilara continues, her hand trailing along the rough stone wall. The texture is cold and uneven, a map of the mason's chisels from centuries ago. She can feel the grit of the mortar, the smoothness of the slate. It grounds her, connecting her to the physical reality of the house. She reaches the foot of the main staircase, a wide, sweeping structure of dark oak that leads up to the family's private quarters. The wood is polished to a high sheen, reflecting the dim light of the candle she carries now, taken from a niche in the wall. The flame flickers, casting a warm, golden glow on the steps ahead. She begins to climb. Creak, step, creak, step. The wood complains under her weight, a series of low groans that echo in the empty stairwell. The banister is smooth and cool under her hand, worn satin-soft by generations of palms. Halfway up, she stops at a landing. There is a window here, a narrow slit overlooking the snowy courtyard. She presses her face close to the glass, feeling the cold radiate from it. Outside, the world is a study in blue and gray. The sun has set, and the twilight is deepening into night. The snow on the ground glows with a faint, ghostly luminescence. A single lantern burns by the gatehouse, a tiny pinprick of orange in the vastness of the winter dark. She watches a guard walk across the courtyard. He is bundled in furs, his breath steaming in the air. Puff, step, puff, step. He stamps his feet to keep the blood moving. The sound is muffled by the thick glass, a distant, rhythmic thudding. Ilara turns away from the window, shivering slightly. The cold is beautiful, but it is deadly. She resumes her climb, eager for the warmth of the solar. Creak, step, creak, step. At the top of the stairs, she enters the gallery that runs along the upper level of the great hall. From here, she can look down into the main body of the hall. The fire is roaring now, a massive bonfire that illuminates the room with a flickering, orange light. The shadows are long and dramatic, stretching up the walls like giants. The servants are setting up the trestle tables for the evening meal. Clatter, bang, slide. They move with practiced efficiency, laying out wooden trenchers and pewter tankards. The noise drifts up to her, a distant clatter of domesticity. She walks along the gallery, her footsteps silent on the rush matting. She passes the doors to the guest chambers. They are closed, dark, and silent. The house feels empty, yet full of hidden life. Behind every door is a fire, a bed, a person waiting out the winter. She reaches the door to the solar. It is heavy, carved with the family crest, a stag's head. She turns the iron ring handle, click, clack. The door swings open. The warmth hits her instantly. It is a dry, scented heat, distinct from the humid chaos of the kitchen. The air smells of the pine logs burning in the fireplace and the beeswax candles that have been lit in her absence. She steps inside and closes the door, leaning back against it for a moment to savor the transition. The room is a golden sanctuary. The fire is burning brightly, casting a warm, flickering light on the tapestries. The shadows are soft and inviting. Her maid, a quiet girl named Isabel, is waiting by the fire. She is warming a linen shift, holding it up to the flames. The fabric glows white-hot in the firelight. "The bed is warmed, my lady," Isabel says softly, her voice barely rising above the crackle of the fire. Ilara nods, moving towards the hearth. She unfastens her heavy woolen cloak, letting it slide from her shoulders. Isabel takes it, folding it carefully and placing it in a chest. "Thank you, Isabel." Ilara sits in her high-backed chair, extending her feet towards the fire. The heat penetrates the leather of her shoes, warming her toes. She sighs, a long, slow exhalation of relief. Isabel brings a small bowl of warm water and a cloth. "For your hands and face, my lady." This is the evening ritual, the damp wash. Not a bath, never a bath, but a targeted cleansing. Ilara dips the cloth into the water. It is warm but not hot. She wrings it out until it is barely damp. She wipes her face. The cloth is rough against her skin, exfoliating gently. She wipes her forehead, her cheeks, her neck. The warmth opens her pores, releasing the day's accumulated dust. She hands the cloth back to Isabel, who rinses it and hands it back. Ilara wipes her hands, scrubbing the knuckles and the palms. She inspects her fingernails in the firelight. They are clean. Isabel takes the bowl away. "Shall I brush your hair, my lady?" "Yes, please." Ilara unpins her hair, letting it fall in a heavy curtain down her back. It is thick and dark, smelling of the rose powder from the morning. Isabel stands behind her, picking up the boar bristle brush. Stroke, lift, stroke, lift. The brushing begins. It is a slow, rhythmic massage for the scalp. The bristles scratch gently, stimulating the blood flow. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Ilara closes her eyes, lulled by the sensation. The fire pops. A log settles in the grate. The wind howls softly outside, a distant threat that cannot reach her here. "The snow is deep tonight," Isabel murmurs, her voice a low drone. "It will be deeper by morning," Ilara replies, her words slow and heavy. They fall silent. The only sound is the brush moving through hair. Swish, swish, swish. After 100 strokes, Isabel stops. She braids the hair loosely for the night, tying the end with a ribbon. There, done. Ilara stands up. It is time to change for bed. The day clothes, the heavy wool, the stiff linen must come off. She unlaces her kirtle. Pick, pull, pick, pull. The laces are stiff, but her fingers are warm now. She steps out of the dress, leaving it in a puddle of fabric on the floor. Isabel picks it up immediately, shaking it out and hanging it on a peg to air. Ilara stands in her shift. The air in the room is warm, but she still feels vulnerable without her layers. She reaches for the fresh night shift that Isabel has been warming. She pulls it over her head. It is hot from the fire, smelling of toasted flax. It settles around her body like a warm embrace. She shivers with pleasure. She climbs into the bed. The sheets are flannel, soft and fuzzy. A warming pan, a brass container filled with hot coals, has been moved between the sheets, leaving a lingering heat. She curls up in the warm spot, pulling the heavy fur coverlet up to her chin. The bed is a fortress. The curtains are drawn around it, creating a small, enclosed space within the larger room. It is dark inside, save for a sliver of light where the curtains meet. She lies still, listening to the sounds of the room. Isabel is moving quietly, tidying up. Clink of the water bowl, rustle of fabric, creak of the floorboards. Then the door opens and closes. Click, Isabel is gone. Ilara is alone. She stares up at the canopy of the bed. It is embroidered with stars, silver thread on dark blue velvet. In the dim light, they seem to twinkle faintly. She thinks of the day. The cold corridor, the smell of the herbs, the heat of the kitchen, the silence of the wardrobe. It has been a good day, a dry day, a safe day. She wiggles her toes in the flannel sheets. They are warm. Her body is warm. Her mind is slow, drifting. The fire pops one last time, a loud crack that signals it's settling for the night. The light outside the curtains dims as the logs burn down to embers. Ilara's breathing deepens, in, out. She thinks of the water in the well, deep and dark and cold. She thinks of the ice on the pond. She thinks of the snow piling up against the walls. Let it snow. Let it freeze. She is here in the center of the warmth, in the heart of the dry, safe house. Her eyes close. The darkness behind her eyelids is velvety and soft. The silence of the winter night wraps around the castle, a heavy, muffling blanket. The wind dies down. The world stops moving. And Lady Ilara sleeps. The hour is difficult to determine in the deep, suffocating blackness of the castle night. It is the time the monks call matins, the halfway point between the death of the last day and the birth of the next. But here, in the secular silence of the manor, it is simply the dead of night. The darkness is not merely an absence of light. It is a physical substance, thick and velvety, filling the hallways and the high vaulted ceilings like a heavy liquid poured from the sky. It presses against the eyes, soothing and absolute. The silence is equally profound. During the day, the castle is a living organism of shouts, footsteps, and clattering iron. Now, it is a tomb of stone and timber. The only sounds are the settling of the massive structure itself, the groan of a beam contracting in the cold, the crack of a stone shifting its weight in the foundation, and the relentless, scouring wind that rubs against the outer walls like a giant, restless cat. In the great hall, the fire has burned down to a vast, glowing bed of embers. It no longer roars. It pulses. The light it casts is deep red, bloody and dim, illuminating only the immediate circle of the hearth and leaving the rest of the cavernous room in shadow. On a low bench near the warmth, wrapped in a blanket of rough gray wool that smells of wood smoke and old dogs, sits Ealdred. He is the night porter. He is the guardian of the heat. While the lord and lady sleep under their furs in the solar, and the servants huddle together in the loft of the kitchen, Ealdred remains awake. His duty is not to fight men, but to fight the cold. He moves. It is a slow, creaking movement. His joints are stiff, mirroring the stiffness of the frozen world outside. He stands up, his knees popping with a soft click. He picks up his lantern. It is a tin box punched with holes, holding a thick tallow candle. He opens the little door of the lantern squeak and holds it to the embers of the fire. He blows gently on a coal. Woo! A tiny flame leaps up, transferring itself to the wick. He closes the lantern door. Snap beams of yellow light shoot out through the punched holes, rotating across the floor as he lifts the handle. His first task is the banking. The fire in the great hall cannot be allowed to go out. To relight a fire of this magnitude in a stone hall that has gone cold is a task of hours, a battle against damp air and downdrafts. The heat must be preserved, trapped within the logs like a spirit in a bottle. Ealdred picks up the great iron shovel, its handle polished smooth by a century of hands. He moves to the edge of the hearth. The heat is still intense here, a dry, baking wave that hits his shins. He begins to shovel ash. Scrape, the shovel slides against the stone hearth. Lift. He holds a pile of gray, powdery ash. Pour. He dumps it gently over the glowing red center of the fire. The sound is soft, a muffled F-whump. A cloud of fine dust rises, swirling in the lantern light. He repeats the motion. Scrape, lift, pour. He is building a blanket of ash. The ash insulates the coals, starving them of just enough oxygen to stop them from burning away, but keeping enough heat to ensure they remain alive until dawn. It is a delicate balance. Too much ash, and the fire suffocates and dies. Too little, and it burns itself out before the sun rises. Ealdred works with the precision of a surgeon. He covers the left side, then the right. He leaves a small vent in the center, a tiny crater where a single tongue of blue flame licks at the darkness. He watches it. It flickers, steady and low. Good. He places the shovel back against the stone wall. Clang. The sound rings out, sharp and lonely. Now the rounds. He walks away from the fire, stepping onto the rush-covered floor. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The rushes are colder here, further from the hearth. The draft that snakes along the floor bites at his ankles through his wool hose. He pulls his hood up. He walks towards the main doors. They are barred with a massive beam of oak dropped into iron brackets. He checks the beam. He pushes against it with his shoulder. It is solid, immovable, but he checks the gap at the bottom of the doors. Snow has drifted against the outside, and a fine white powder has been forced through the crack by the wind. It lies on the floor in a crescent shape, glittering in the lantern light. It does not melt. The air here is freezing. Ealdred takes a bundle of old rags from a basket near the door. They are scraps of worn-out tunics and torn blankets. He kneels down. His knees hit the stone. Thud. He begins to stuff the rags into the crack. Push, twist, jam. He uses a wooden wedge to force the fabric tight against the wood and stone. He works his way along the bottom of the door, inch by inch. He can feel the cold air rushing in against his fingers, a localized blizzard. As he packs the rags, the draft stops. The whistle of the wind changes pitch, becoming a duller, more distant moan. He has sealed the breach. He stands up, brushing the dust from his knees. He holds the lantern up to the iron hinges. They are coated in a thin layer of frost, white and feathery. He touches one with his thumb. The frost melts instantly, leaving a dark, wet smudge on the metal. The iron sucks the heat from his skin. He withdraws his hand quickly, tucking it back into his sleeve. He turns and walks towards the buttery passage. The shadows swing wildly around him, a carousel of darkness. He passes the long tables. They are empty, bare wood stretching out into the gloom. He runs a finger along the edge of a table. It comes away dusty. He enters the service corridor. Here the smell changes. It is the smell of the storerooms, apples, onions, dust, mouse droppings. He stops at the door to the cellar. He must check the root vegetables. If the frost gets into the cellar, the turnips will rot. The potatoes will turn sweet and mushy. He opens the door. It groans. Creak. A blast of cool, damp air rises up from the dark hole of the stairwell. He descends. Step. The cellar is a vaulted crypt of brick. It is silent. The lantern light reveals piles of root vegetables heaped in straw-lined bins. Ealdred walks to the nearest bin. He reaches in and pulls out a turnip. It is cold, heavy, and solid as a rock. He squeezes it. It is firm. No rot. No frost. The earth insulation is working. He puts the turnip back. Thump. He walks to the ale barrels. They are huge, shadowy hogsheads lined up against the wall. He taps one with his knuckles. Thonk, thonk. The sound is deep and hollow. The liquid inside is unfrozen. The alcohol protects it. He stands in the center of the cellar and listens. He is listening for rats. Scritch. There, in the corner, he shines the lantern. Two small red eyes reflect the light for a second, then vanish behind a sack of grain. Ealdred nods. The rats are there, but they are quiet. They are cold, too. They are huddled in their nests. He leaves them be. Tonight is too cold for hunting. He ascends the stairs. Step, back into the corridor. He locks the cellar door. Click. His next destination is the stables. This requires leaving the main keep. It is the most dangerous part of the night. He walks to the side door, the small servant's entrance that leads to the inner ward. He sets the lantern down on a shelf. He puts on his heavy outer cloak, a garment of thick, felted wool that is almost waterproof. He pulls on heavy leather mittens lined with rabbit fur. He lifts the latch. The metal is freezing. He pushes the door open. The wind hits him like a physical blow. It is a shock, a violence of cold. It steals the breath from his lungs. Gasp. The snow is swirling in the courtyard, a chaotic white vortex. The ground is covered in drifts. He steps out. Crunch. The snow is hard-packed and dry, squeaking under his boots. The wind howls in his ears, tearing at his hood. He grabs the lantern and shields it with his body. If the light goes out, he is in trouble. He walks with his head down, trudging through the snow. Trudge. The stable is across the yard, a long, low building of timber and thatch. It looks like a dark hill in the snow. He reaches the door. It is a split door. He unlatches the bottom half. He slips inside and pushes it closed quickly, leaning his back against it to latch it against the wind. Silence returns, but it is a different silence. It is a warm, living silence. The stable smells of horses. It is a rich, pungent, ammonia-tinged smell of manure, straw, leather, and warm animal bodies. It is significantly warmer here than outside. The heat of 20 large animals is trapped within the walls. Ealdred hangs the lantern on a hook. The horses are asleep or resting. They stand in their stalls, massive shapes in the gloom. He walks down the aisle, soft step, the straw muffles his boots. He stops at the stall of the Lord's destrier, a giant black stallion named Thunder. The horse is awake. He turns his massive head to look at Ealdred. His eyes are dark liquid pools reflecting the lantern light. Ealdred reaches out and touches the horse's neck. The coat is thick, growing shaggy for the winter. Beneath the hair, the skin is warm, radiant. It is a living furnace. Ealdred keeps his hand there, stealing a bit of the warmth. The horse blows air through his nostrils. Prrr fluff. A cloud of steam erupts, visible in the cold air, smelling of digested oats. Ealdred checks the water bucket. There is a thin film of ice on top. He breaks it with his gloved fist. Crack. He removes the shards of ice and throws them into the straw. The horse dips his muzzle in and drinks. Slurp, slurp, swallow. Ealdred moves down the line. Check bucket, break ice, check blanket. He adjusts the wool blanket on an old mare. She shifts her weight, her hooves clopping softly on the wooden floorboards. Clop, shuffle. He checks the hay nets. They are still half full. The horses have enough fuel to keep their internal fires burning through the night. At the end of the stable, the barn cats are sleeping. They are piled together in a nest of hay, a pyramid of fur. Ealdred counts them. 1, 2, 3, 4, all accounted for. They do not move. They are in a deep winter torpor. The stable is the coziest place in the castle. It is humble, dirty, and smells strong, but it is alive. The rhythmic breathing of the horses creates a low, resonant hum that vibrates in the timber walls. In, out, in, out. Ealdred stands there for a long moment, soaking in the animal heat. He feels the tension in his shoulders relax. The storm outside feels 1,000 miles away. But he must return. The hall waits. He takes the lantern. He goes back to the door. He braces himself. He opens the door. The wind screams again. The cold attacks. He steps out. Crunch, trudge, crunch. The walk back seems longer. The wind is against him now, pushing him back. The snow stings his exposed cheeks like needles. He focuses on the small door of the keep, a dark rectangle in the gray wall. He reaches it. He stumbles inside. He slams the door. Bang, he latches it. He leans against the wall, breathing heavily. Huff, huff. His breath clouds the air. He stamps his boots to shake off the snow. It falls in clumps to the floor where it will melt into dark puddles. He removes his outer cloak. It is stiff with cold. He hangs it up. He picks up the lantern and walks back to the great hall. The fire is as he left it, a dark mound with a glowing red heart. The heat is still there, radiating softly. He checks the hourglass on the table near the dais. The sand has run through. He turns it over. The sand begins to trickle again, a thin, silent stream of time. He sits back down on his bench. He pulls the gray blanket around his shoulders. He stares at the embers. He thinks of the water in the well, deep, still. He thinks of the ice on the river, thick, white. He thinks of the Lady Alara sleeping in her bed of feathers. The castle is a ship floating on a sea of winter, and he is the helmsman, keeping it pointed towards the morning. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a piece of hard cheese and a crust of bread. He eats slowly. Chew, swallow, chew, swallow. The food is dry and salty. It makes him thirsty. He takes a sip from a leather flask of small beer. It is lukewarm. He settles back against the stone pillar behind the bench. The stone is cool, but the fire is warm. He is suspended between the two. The wind buffets the high windows. Rattle, rattle, a draft stirs the rushes. Rustle, a log settles in the hearth. Tink. Ealdred closes his eyes, but he does not sleep. He listens, he waits, he breathes. The night is long, the night is boring, the night is safe. He counts the seconds in his head, syncing them with the falling sand. 1, 2, 3, 4. The castle breathes around him, huge, ancient, enduring. High above the stone-flagged floor of the great hall, and far removed from the earthy scents of the stables, lies the nursery. It is situated in the south-facing tower, the part of the castle that catches the most of the sun's weak winter arc, though now, in the depth of the night, it is held in the same suspended animation of darkness as the rest of the world. The door to the nursery is not like the other doors. It is lower, wider, and heavily padded on the inside with quilted leather stuffed with horsehair. This padding serves two purposes. It dampens the sound of the household so the infant Lord Julian may sleep, and more importantly, it creates a hermetic seal against the drafts that roam the corridors like invisible wolves. Inside, the air is distinct. It does not smell of roasting meat or pine smoke or damp stone. It smells of warm milk, dried chamomile, sweet almond oil, and the soft, powdery scent of orris root. It is a biological warmth, a humid, tender atmosphere that feels like the inside of a hive. Maud, the wet nurse, sits in a low rocking chair near the hearth. The chair is made of willow, bent and woven into a shape that cups the body. It sits on a thick rug of sheepskins, their wool combed out until it is white and fluffy as a cloud. Maud is awake, though her eyes are half closed. In this room, sleep is never deep. It is a shallow, drifting state, always tethered to the rhythm of the cradle. The cradle stands beside her. It is a masterpiece of winter engineering. Carved from solid oak, it is hooded like a cobra, a wooden canopy protecting the head of the sleeper from falling dust and rising drafts. The sides are high and solid, with no slats for the cold to slip through. Inside, it is lined with layers of flannel and fur. Maud reaches out a hand. Her fingers are rough, but her touch is light as a moth. She places her palm on the side of the cradle. It is warm. She pushes gently. Rock, creak, rock, creak. The sound is the heartbeat of the room. It is a slow wooden metronome. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The cradle sways on its curved rockers, a motion that mimics the womb. Inside the bundle of blankets lies the infant. He is invisible, buried beneath a mound of wool. Only his face is exposed, a small, pale circle in the gloom. He is sleeping deeply. His breath comes in tiny, rapid puffs, visible only if one looks very closely. Puff, puff, puff. Maud stops rocking. The silence rushes back in, filling the corners of the room. She leans forward to check the fire. The nursery fire is different from the great hall's roaring beast. It is a small, contained fire, burning in a grate protected by a high wire mesh screen. The fuel here is not raw logs which pop and spit, but charcoal and peat, fuels that burn hot and silent with very little smoke. The peat glows with a dull, orange intensity like molten gold. It gives off a scent of ancient earth, a grounding, heavy smell. Maud picks up a pair of brass tongs. She rearranges a block of peat. It crumbles slightly, sending a shower of orange dust into the ash pan. Sizzle. The heat shifts, radiating outward. She holds her hands to the screen. Her palms tinge pink. She looks at the hourglass on the mantelpiece. The sand has run out. It is time for the change. In the winter, a wet baby is a cold baby, and a cold baby is in danger. The changing of the clout, the diaper, is a military operation of speed and dryness. There is no water involved. To wash a baby's bottom with water in this temperature would be madness. The evaporation alone would chill the skin instantly. Maud stands up. Her knees crack pop, a sound swallowed by the sheepskin rug. She moves to the changing table, a high chest padded with a leather cushion. First, the preparation. She opens a drawer. She takes out a fresh linen clout, a square of white fabric hemmed by hand. She holds it to the fire. She turns it over and over. She presses it against her own cheek to test the temperature. It must be hot but not burning. It must be bone dry. She takes a pot of oil. This is goose grease, rendered and clarified, mixed with a drop of lavender. It is solid in the pot, a white balm. She digs out a small amount with her finger and rubs it into her palm. Her body heat melts it instantly into a slick, fragrant oil. She is ready. She lifts the baby from the cradle. He is a heavy bundle, dense with layers. He stirs but does not wake fully. He lets out a small, bird-like sound, meh. She lays him on the changing table. Now speed is essential. She unpins the swaddling bands. These are long strips of linen wound around the body to keep the limbs straight and the warmth in. Unwind. Round and round. Unwind. The bands fall away. The outer blanket is opened. The inner blanket is opened. The soiled clout is removed. The cold air touches his skin. He draws his legs up, a reflex. Maud acts quickly. She does not use water. She uses a soft, dry cloth to wipe the skin. Wipe. Wipe. The linen absorbs the moisture. Then the oil. She rubs her oily hands over his skin. The grease acts as a barrier, a waterproof seal that protects the skin from the ammonia of the urine. It glides on smoothly. Rub, circle, rub. The baby relaxes. The friction creates heat. The scent of lavender rises up. Then the powder. She shakes a small shaker of lycopodium powder, spores of a club moss that repel water like magic. A fine yellow dust settles on the skin. It is soft as silk. It ensures total dryness. Now the rebuilding of the fortress. Fresh, warm clout. Fold, pin, inner blanket, wrap, tuck, outer blanket, wrap, tuck. And finally the swaddling bands. This is the art of the nursery. Maud takes the long strip of linen. She anchors it at the chest. She winds it down, over, under, pull tight, over, under, pull tight. She binds the arms to the sides. She binds the legs together. The baby becomes a solid, immobile cylinder. This restriction is comforting to him. It mimics the tightness of the womb. It prevents him from startling himself awake. It keeps his body heat turned inward, cycling back to his core. He is a little log of warmth. She lifts him up. He is stiff in his wrappings, a perfect package. She holds him to her shoulder. She smells the top of his head. It smells of the cradle, milk, and wool. It is the purest scent in the world. He roots against her neck, searching. He is hungry. Maud sits back in the rocking chair. She unlaces the front of her bodice. She settles the baby in the crook of her arm. The feeding begins. It is a silent process. There is only the sound of his swallowing, gulp, gulp, and the rhythmic movement of his jaw. Maud stares into the fire. Her mind drifts. She thinks of nothing. She is simply a source of heat and food. She is a biological extension of the fireplace. The room is so quiet she can hear the candle flame fluttering in the draft. Flap, flap, flap. The wax drips down the side of the candle, forming a stalactite of white. The feeding ends. The baby falls back into a milk-drunk stupor. His head lolls back. A single drop of milk sits on his lip, glistening like a pearl. Maud wipes it away with her thumb. She burps him gently, pat, pat, pat. The sound is dull against the layers of swaddling, belch, a tiny sound. He is content. She places him back in the cradle. She tucks the sheepskin liner around the wooden hood, creating a cave. She checks the angle. Perfect. She sits back down. She begins to rock again. Rock, creak, rock, creak. She picks up her knitting. It is a small stocking, white wool on 4 needles. She does not need to look at it. Her fingers know the way. Knit, purl, knit, purl. The needles click softly. Click, 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 click. The rhythm of the needles meshes with the rhythm of the rocker. It is a polyrhythm of boredom. It is a lullaby of mechanics. Maud looks at the window. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn, but a gap at the bottom reveals the stone sill. There is ice on the inside of the glass. Not just frost, but ice. Thick, opaque ice that has grown during the night. It looks like a fern forest, white and crystalline. She shivers. The cold is right there, inches away, pressing against the glass, trying to find a way in. But the room holds. The peat burns. The wool insulates. The oil seals. She thinks of the laundry. The piles of soiled clouts that must be washed in the morning. That is a task for the scullery maids, down in the steam and the lye. Here in the tower, there is only the clean, dry cycle of the night. She closes her eyes for a moment. The heat from the fire is making her drowsy. She catches herself. She jerks her head up. She must not sleep deep. She must listen. She listens to the wind. It has changed direction. It is no longer battering the south wall. It is whistling around the chimney pots, a high, lonely sound. Woo-oh-ee. It sounds like a flute played by a giant. She listens to the baby. Puff, puff, still breathing, still warm. She reaches for a cup of posset on the table, hot milk curdled with ale and spiced with nutmeg. It has gone lukewarm, a skin forming on the top. She drinks it anyway. It is thick and sweet. It coats her stomach. She wipes her mouth with the back of her hand. She picks up the needles again. Click, 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 click. The night stretches on. It feels infinite. There is no beginning and no end to this winter. There is only the room, the fire, and the cradle. On the ceiling, the shadows thrown by the firelight dance. They look like slow-moving clouds. They merge and separate, forming shapes that dissolve as soon as they appear. A bear, a ship, a mountain. Maud watches the ceiling. She counts the beams. 1, 2, 3, 4. The wood is dark, stained with age. It has seen 100 babies in this cradle. It has seen 100 winters. It has seen the plague and the wars and the feasts. It remains. She looks back at the cradle. The baby has not moved. The swaddling holds him fast. He is safe. She stops rocking. The cradle slows. Rock, rock, stop. The silence returns, heavier than before. Maud leans her head back against the chair. She pulls her shawl tighter. She is a guardian of the dry warmth. She is the keeper of the oil and the wool. She waits for the dawn. It is hours away. But here in the nursery, time is measured not in hours but in breaths. In, out, in, out. The world turns slowly in the dark. The snow piles higher on the ledge. The ice thickens on the glass. The peat crumbles into ash. And the baby sleeps, a warm, dry seed waiting for the spring. The night deepens, shifting from the watchful hours of the nursery into the profound, absolute stillness of the wolf hour. This is the time when the castle's pulse is at its slowest, a time when the very stones of the walls seem to hold their breath in the freezing air. Far removed from the domestic warmth of the solar and the animal heat of the stables, there exists a place of solitary cold and silence, the chapel. It is a small, stone-ribbed sanctuary tucked into the eastern curtain wall, a space designed not for comfort, but for endurance. Here, the temperature is indistinguishable from the outside air, save for the lack of wind. The air inside is stationary, a block of ice that has been carved out of the night and enclosed in masonry. It smells of ancient beeswax, the resinous smoke of frankincense that has settled into the porous limestone over 300 years, and the sharp, metallic tang of silver polish. Father Anselm is the only soul awake in this sector. He is an old man, his skin as parchment thin and dry as the vellum he guards. He moves through the sacristy with the practiced, shuffling gait of one who knows every flagstone by the feel of it through his soles. He wears no linen shift. His penance and his protection is wool. A heavy habit, of course, undyed wool, rough enough to exfoliate the skin, worn over a hair shirt that traps a layer of warm air against his ribs. He enters the main body of the chapel. The darkness here is absolute, a physical weight that presses against the eyes. He carries no lantern. He does not need one. His hands know the way. He reaches out, his fingers brushing against the rough texture of the wall, scrape, slide. He counts the pillars by touch. 1, cold, damp limestone. 2, smoother granite. 3, the wood of the choir stall. He stops at the altar. It is a block of marble stripped bare for the season. In the center sits the tabernacle, and beside it the great iron candelabra. The candles are unlit. They are tall, thick pillars of beeswax, yellowed with age. The wicks are black and curved like charred hooks. Anselm reaches into the folds of his sleeve and produces a small tinder box. It is cold metal against his fingers. Click. He opens it. Inside lie a piece of flint, a steel striker, and a pinch of charred cloth, tinder. He strikes the steel against the flint. Chink. A spark flies out, a tiny, desperate star in the void. It misses the tinder. Chink. Another spark. It lands on the char cloth. A tiny red eye opens in the fabric. It glows, breathing. Anselm blows on it gently. Woo! The red eye widens, eating the cloth. He touches a sulfur-tipped splint to the ember. Hiss! A blue flame erupts, smelling of rotten eggs, then settles into a steady yellow burn. He transfers the flame to the first candle. The wick resists. It is cold, saturated with old wax. The flame licks at it, melting a tiny pool around the base. Sizzle. The wick catches. A tall, steady flame rises, illuminating the altar in a pool of gold. He lights the second, sizzle, flare. And the third, sizzle, flare. The light reveals the breath clouding in front of his face. Haya, haya. It is a rhythmic fog appearing and disappearing with his respiration. It is the only moisture in the room. He moves to the holy water font near the door. It is a stone basin carved in the shape of a scallop shell. He looks inside. The water is solid. A thick, opaque lens of ice covers the surface. He does not break it. To break the ice would be violent. Instead, he places his fingertips on the surface of the ice. The cold burns his skin. He traces the sign of the cross on the ice. Vertical, horizontal. It is a dry blessing. The intention is enough. The water is there, suspended in crystal, its purifying nature preserved by the frost. He withdraws his hand, tucking it back into the warmth of his opposite sleeve. He walks to the side of the chapel to the scriptorium niche. This is his domain. A sloped desk of oak, stained black with ink, sits under a narrow window. The window is shuttered tight, but the cold radiates from it like heat from a fire, only in reverse. On the desk lies a manuscript. It is a psalter, a book of psalms he has been copying since the first leaves fell in October. The pages are vellum, calfskin. They are stiff, creamy, and smell of lime and scraped hide. Anselm sits on the high stool. The wood is freezing. He settles his robes around him, creating a tent of wool. He picks up his tools. The quill. It is a goose feather, the flight feather from the left wing, so it curves away from his hand. He inspects the nib. It has dulled. He picks up his pen knife. It is a small blade, sharp as a razor. He performs the cut, slice. The sound is tiny, a microscopic violence against the quill. A thin curl of quill meat falls to the desk. Slice. He shapes the tip. It must be perfect, a square cut for the Gothic script. Scrape. He tests the flexibility on his thumbnail. Click. It snaps back. Good. Now the ink. The inkhorn sits in a hole in the desk. It is made of cow horn filled with iron gall ink, a mixture of oak galls, iron salts, and gum arabic. Anselm looks into the horn. The ink has thickened in the cold. It is sludge, a black, viscous syrup that will not flow. This is the great battle of the winter scribe, the viscosity of the ink. He cannot add water. Water would freeze. He must warm it. He takes the horn out of the desk. He holds it in his hands. He rubs his palms against the horn. Rub, 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 friction. He brings the horn to his mouth and breathes on it. Haya, haya. The warm air from his lungs caresses the cold horn. He does this for a long time. There is no hurry. The night is long, the ink must be right. If it is too thick, it will blob. If it is too thin, it will ghost. Slowly the ink warms, it loosens. He swirls it gently, swish. It moves like heavy cream. It is ready. He dips the pen, dip. He wipes the excess on the rim, scrape. He brings the pen to the vellum. He does not write immediately. He hovers. He visualizes the letter. The first letter of the verse is D, Dominus, the Lord. He touches the nib to the skin, scritch. The sound is loud in the silence. It is the sound of thought becoming matter. Scritch, scratch, the downstroke, heavy, black. The ink bites into the vellum, a permanent stain. Flick, the serif, a tiny hairline fracture of ink. He writes slowly. DOMINUS, the letters are uniform, a fence of black pickets against the white snow of the page. Scritch, scratch, dip, wipe, scritch. The rhythm is hypnotic. It is a form of meditation. His breathing slows to match the strokes. In dip, outright. His fingers are cold. They are stiff, claw-like. He stops every few words to flex them. Crack, crack. He holds them over the candle flame, high enough to feel the warmth but not melt the wax. The heat seeps into his knuckles, loosening the tendons. He looks at the page. The illumination is next. He picks up a small shell containing gold leaf. He breathes on the page to make the size, the sticky base, tacky. Haya. The moisture of his breath activates the glue. He uses a specialized tool, a dog's tooth burnisher, to apply the gold. He lifts a flake of gold. It is weightless, fluttering in the thermal current of the candle. He lays it down, pat. He rubs it with the tooth. Rub, rub, rub. The friction heats the gold, bonding it to the vellum. It begins to shine. In the candlelight, the gold letter seems to float above the page, a piece of captured sunlight. Anselm pauses. He looks up at the crucifix hanging in the gloom above the altar. The figure is shadowed, silent. He thinks about the concept of washing. The monks wash their hands before meals, a ritual splash of cold water. But the true washing, the deep cleaning, is this: the copying of the word, the ordering of the chaotic mind into straight, black lines, the purification of the soul through the discipline of the hand. The ink is the water, the vellum is the skin, the pen is the brush. He feels clean, he feels dry. His body is a husk, a container for the work. The dust of the chapel settles on his shoulders, a gray mantle. He does not brush it off. It is part of the insulation. He hears a sound, drip, wax falling from the candle onto the iron stand. Drip. It hits the metal and solidifies instantly. He dips the pen again. Dip, scritch, scratch. The text grows, a block of Latin, a fortress of language. Illumina oculos meos, lighten my eyes. He works for an hour, perhaps two. The candle burns down an inch. The pool of melted wax widens. He makes a mistake, a tiny slip of the hand. The tail of a G is too long, he sighs, a puff of white breath. He waits for the ink to dry. It must be perfectly dry. He blows on it. Woo. He picks up the scraper, a curved knife. He scratches at the dried ink. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The knife lifts the ink from the surface of the skin. It turns to black dust. He brushes the dust away with a hare's foot. Swish. The vellum is white again. The mistake is erased. The surface is roughened, textured like suede. He takes a piece of smooth chalk and rubs it over the spot to polish it back to smoothness. Rub, rub. It is as if it never happened. The page is forgiven. He continues. The cold is seeping through the floor now, penetrating the soles of his sandals. He wiggles his toes. They are numb. It does not matter. The work keeps him warm. The concentration burns calories. He thinks of the summer garden where the ink was born, the oak trees, the wasps that laid the eggs in the galls. He thinks of the calves that gave the skin. He thinks of the bees that made the wax. All of nature is here, dead and preserved, serving the text. The library behind the altar is filled with these preserved lives. Thousands of hours of silence, trapped in leather bindings. It is a battery of stillness. Anselm stops. His hand is shaking. The cold has won for now. He cannot control the fine lines. It is time to stop. He cleans the pen. He wipes the nib on a piece of cloth. Wipe, wipe. No ink must remain or it will corrode the quill. He closes the inkhorn. Pop. He pushes the stopper in tight. He closes the book. Thump. The heavy wooden cover falls shut. He fastens the brass clasps. Click, click. The book is sealed. The words are safe. He stands up. His back is stiff. He stretches, his spine popping like dry twigs. Crack, crack. He walks to the altar. He does not blow out the candles. That would be disrespectful. He uses a snuffer, a brass cone on a stick. He lowers it over the flame. Phut! The flame dies. A thin ribbon of gray smoke rises, smelling of burnt wick. Phut! Phut! The darkness returns. It rushes in from the corners, reclaiming the space. The only light is the red eye of the sanctuary lamp, hanging from the ceiling, burning olive oil that never freezes. Anselm stands in the dark. He smells the smoke. He smells the cold. He turns and walks back towards the sacristy. Shuffle, slide, shuffle, slide. He reaches the door. He opens it. The corridor beyond is marginally less cold, warmed by the distant memory of the kitchen fires. He leaves the chapel. He leaves the silence behind, though he carries it with him, wrapped in his wool, inked into his fingers. He walks towards the dormitory. He will sleep for an hour before the bells ring for prime. He will lie on his pallet, his hands folded on his chest, dreaming of black letters on white snow. The castle is quiet, the ink is dry, the ice is solid, everything is in its place. The wheel of the night has turned its full, slow circle. We have reached the hour of prime, the first hour of the day, though the sun has yet to breach the horizon. The world outside the castle walls is a study in varying shades of blue, deep indigo at the zenith, fading to a bruised, icy violet at the tree line. The snow, which had fallen with such relentless silence throughout the night, has finally ceased. It lies now in vast, undulating drifts, smoothing the sharp edges of the landscape into soft, white dunes. The air is motionless, held in a crystalline suspension of cold so profound that it seems to have frozen time itself. Inside the castle, the transition from the dormancy of night to the activity of day begins not with a shout, but with a whisper. It starts in the deepest part of the structure, in the scullery, where the stone flags are coldest. A young kitchen boy, Thomas, is the first to stir. He rises from his pallet of straw in the corner, shaking the sleep from his limbs. His breath plumes before him, a white ghost in the dim light. He pulls his woolen tunic tighter, shivering against the dawn chill. His first task is the water. He approaches the great wooden water barrel that stands near the door. During the night, the surface has frozen over completely. It is not merely a film of ice. It is a solid plate, 2 inches thick, sealing the water beneath like a lid of glass. Thomas picks up the iron mallet kept for this specific purpose. Heft, swing, crack. The sound is sharp, a gunshot in the silence. The ice fractures, spiderwebbing outward from the point of impact. He strikes it again. Crack. A shard breaks free, bobbing in the dark water below. He uses a ladle to scoop out the broken pieces, tossing them into the sink where they clatter against the stone. Clatter-tink, clatter-tink. This is the first water of the day. It is painfully cold. He dips a bucket in. The water rushes in, swirling dark and heavy. He lifts it out. The handle bites into his palm. He carries it to the main kitchen hearth. The kitchen fire, banked by Ealdred hours ago, is a sleeping giant. Thomas rakes back the gray ash. Scrape, scrape. Beneath the blanket of dust, the coals are still alive, glowing a dull, angry red. He places a handful of dry kindling, twigs of birch and pine, onto the embers. He picks up the bellows. The bellows are huge, made of leather and wood, shaped like a pear. He opens the handles. Creak. The leather lung expands, sucking in the cool air of the kitchen. He squeezes the handles together. Wheeze. A jet of air shoots into the heart of the fire. Creak, wheeze, creak, wheeze. The coals brighten, turning from red to orange to yellow. The kindling smokes, then catches. Snap. A flame appears. It is small, but it grows. Thomas feeds it larger sticks, then a split log. The fire takes hold. The heat begins to radiate outward, pushing back the damp chill of the room. The smell of wood smoke returns, the incense of the morning. Above the kitchen, the heat begins to rise. It travels through the stone chimney, warming the bricks of the flues that pass behind the walls of the upper chambers. It is a slow, conductive warmth, taking hours to penetrate the masonry, but it is steady. In the great hall, the light is changing. The high windows, previously black squares of nothingness, are now turning a pale, milky gray. The darkness is thinning. Ealdred, the night porter, stands up from his bench. His shift is over. He stretches, his back popping, crack, crack, and looks around the vast, empty room. The dogs are waking up. Miller, the wolfhound, lifts his head and yawns, a cavernous display of pink tongue and white teeth. Yawn. He shakes himself, his ears flapping against his skull. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Dust motes fly from his coat, dancing in the strengthening light. Ealdred walks to the main doors. He does not open them. To open them would be to lose the precious heat he has guarded all night. Instead, he peers through the Judas hole. The courtyard is empty. The snow is pristine, unbroken by footprints. The well is a white mound. The world is silent. He turns back. He picks up his lantern, now burned down to a stub of tallow, and blows it out. Fuff. A trail of white smoke rises. The artificial light is no longer needed. The gray day has arrived. High in the solar, Lady Alara is pulled from sleep not by noise, but by the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The fire in her hearth has burned down to ash, and the air has cooled. The heavy velvet curtains around her bed have trapped her body heat, creating a microclimate of warmth, but the tip of her nose is cold. She opens her eyes. The canopy above her is a dark blur. She lies still, savoring the last moments of the night's paralysis. She listens. She hears the distant, muffled sound of a rooster crowing from the village below the castle walls. Err-er-er-er. It is a faint, scratchy sound, filtered through stone and snow. It is the signal. She hears the bells of the chapel ringing for prime. Dong, dong, dong. The sound is heavy, melancholic, resonating through the floorboards. It is the heartbeat of the routine. She sits up. The movement disrupts the pocket of warm air under the furs. She pulls the coverlet up to her chin. The day has begun, and with it, the renewal of the dry ritual. Her maid, Isabel, enters the room. She carries a basket of fresh wood. She moves quietly to the fireplace. Clack, thud. She rebuilds the fire. She uses a spill, a twisted piece of paper lit from the embers to start the blaze. Whoosh, the fire catches. The sound is a sudden rush of air. The light flares up, casting dancing shadows on the ceiling. Isabel turns to the bed. "Good morning, my lady. Good morning, Isabel. The snow has stopped." "Is it deep?" "Very deep, my lady. The stable boys are digging a path to the woodpile." Ilara nods. The logistics of the snow are a distant concern. Her immediate concern is the transition from the bed to the day. She slides her legs out from under the furs. The rush matting is cold. She finds her felt slippers immediately. She stands, wrapping her arms around herself. She moves to the window. She unlatches the shutter. Click, clack. She pushes it open just an inch. The air that rushes in is shocking. It smells of ice, pine needles, and vast, empty space. It is cleaner than any water. It scours the lungs. She breathes it in deeply. Inhale. The cold burns her nostrils. Exhale. Her breath clouds the glass. She looks out. The world is white and gray. The sky is a flat, featureless sheet of pearl. There is no sun, only a diffuse brightness that casts no shadows. The trees in the orchard are skeletal, their branches coated in ice that glitters dully. She closes the shutter. Bang! She latches it tight. The room is sealed once more. She turns to the basin. The water in the pitcher is frozen again. Isabel has anticipated this. She brings a fresh ewer of hot water from the kitchen, carried all the way up the stairs wrapped in a towel to keep the heat in. She pours the hot water into the basin. Steam rises, curling into the cool air. Ilara dips her cloth. She washes her face. The heat is a shock, then a comfort. She scrubs the sleep from her eyes. She dries her face immediately with a rough linen towel. Rub, rub, pat. Dryness is restored. She moves to the dressing table. The clothes are waiting. The layers, the armor. First, the fresh linen shift. It is stiff, smelling of the lavender from the wardrobe. She puts it on. It rustles as it settles over her skin. Swish. Then the wool stockings. Then the kirtle. Then the surcoat. Then the fur-lined mantle. Layer upon layer, trapping the air, building the insulation. She feels herself becoming heavier, larger, softer. She becomes a creature of wool and flax. She sits while Isabel braids her hair. The brush moves rhythmically, stroke, stroke. The powder is applied. The scent of roses returns, masking the scent of the night. Ilara looks at her reflection in the silver mirror. Her face is pale, framed by the dark hair and the white linen coif. She looks like a statue. She looks preserved. She stands up. She is ready. Not for battle, not for a journey, but for the day. The long, slow, boring day of winter. She walks to the door of the solar. She opens it. The corridor stretches out before her, dim and drafty. She steps out. She walks towards the great hall. She can smell the breakfast now. Porridge, toasted bread, ale, the smells of survival. She reaches the gallery rail and looks down. The hall is coming alive. The servants are moving the trestle tables. The fire is roaring. The smoke hangs in the rafters. The dogs are pacing. It is the same scene as yesterday. It will be the same scene tomorrow. The thought is not depressing. It is comforting. In a world that is trying to freeze them to death, repetition is a victory. Every day that is the same is a day they have survived. She descends the stairs. Step, step, step. Her skirts sweep the dust from the steps. She reaches the bottom. She walks across the rushes. Crunch, crunch. She feels the warmth of the fire on her face. She sits at the high table. A servant places a bowl of porridge before her. It is steaming, topped with a knob of butter that is slowly melting into a golden pool. She picks up her spoon. It is silver, cold to the touch. She dips it into the hot oats. She eats, swallow. The warmth fills her chest. She looks at the tapestry on the far wall. The hunters are still frozen in their chase. The stag is still leaping. The leaves are still green. She thinks of the bath, the great wooden tub in the cellar. It is gathering dust. Spiders have spun webs across the rim. It is a memory of summer. It does not belong here. Here there is only the dry wash, the friction, the linen, the smoke, the powder, the oil. She is clean enough. She is warm enough. Outside, the wind begins to pick up again. It howls around the corners of the tower, a high, lonely sound. Woo-woo. It scratches at the shutters. It piles the snow against the door. But inside, the walls are thick. The fire is hot. The larder is full. Ilara takes another spoonful of porridge. She watches the steam rise from her bowl and disappear into the air. She is safe. The castle is a dry island in a white ocean. The winter will last for months. The ice will thicken. The nights will lengthen. But for now, the sun has technically risen. The cycle continues. The linen is fresh. The fire is lit. She rests her hand on the table. She feels the grain of the wood. She takes a deep breath, smelling the wood smoke and the wool. She closes her eyes for a second, then opens them. She is awake. The day is here. And she is content to let it pass, slowly, quietly, and completely without water. The end.